Hey everybody, Patrick Hostis here. So, got back from that hearing today that was in Olympia, Washington, about those gun bills that they're trying to force feed down our throats here. And it was pretty interesting. After my comments here, I'm going to play you the raw audio so you can hear everything that was said today. There was pretty much the people that want to implement, and real quickly, just so you know what these gun bills are, one of them has to do with supposedly bump stocks, but it also happens to encompass any kind of alterations to the trigger, like buying a different kind of trigger. Another one has to do with limiting magazine capacities to only 10 rounds, which is ridiculous considering when you buy an AR-15, typically it comes with a 30-round magazine. So that's pretty stupid. Let's see, the other one has to do with prosecuting people who leave guns unlocked or unattended, or in some way where somebody doesn't need them or shouldn't have them gets them, something like that. That's about the only ones that jump out at me. Oh, another one, and this is a pretty important one, is a gun bill that would leave it up to the local authorities or the local government to decide how they want to, or what gun laws they want to enforce. So in other words, here in Washington State, maybe in Tacoma it's legal for you to have a gun, you know, concealed carry or whatever, but when you drive up to Seattle it's not. So it's absolutely ridiculous. You basically cross the street and you become a criminal. All these gun bills have something in common. None of them really would help anything because criminals don't give a damn. They'll just simply buy fully automatic weapons out of Mexico that go right through our porous border. But they seem to think that even though there's only been one well-reported crime that involved the use of a bump stock, which was the massacre in Las Vegas on October 1st, 2017. So aside from that, there hasn't been anything. But let me tell you, the hearing, and you'll hear it today if you listen to the audio, the theme from the pro gun enforcement or anti-gun people or whatever you want to call it, the constant theme was Las Vegas. They had people who had lost family members there or who were the victims of the shooting themselves were there, and that was all they were talking about all day long was Las Vegas, Las Vegas, Las Vegas. And all of their arguments, in my opinion, were based on emotion, not on hard facts or logic or, you know, any kind of reason. They're just all based in this fantasy world. It just gets me where people really think that criminals for some reason are gonna follow laws because you make them. That's so stupid. I mean, it's illegal to rob and murder people, but criminals still do it now, don't they? You know, so turning a bunch of law-abiding people into criminals, I just don't see how that's gonna help. And the other thing, and you know what this is all about, you take out all the emotion and all that, in my opinion, what it's about, they can't get rid of the Second Amendment. The American people don't want it gone. They want it left alone, obviously, or a person like Donald Trump wouldn't be elected. So they don't want that, yet they keep, and they know that. They know they can't have an open debate and legislatively get rid of it. It's not going to happen. So what do they want to do? They just chip away at it with these stupid little laws and regulations and this and that. It's the same garbage I've been trying, you know, my entire life to get rid of the Second Amendment. And, you know, they'll try this BS of, well, we'll prosecute you if you don't lock up your guns. Oh, you're limited to only 10 rounds per magazine. And, oh, by the way, don't use bump stocks. Okay, well, let's see. Criminals don't give a, excuse the language, but criminals don't give a shit. They don't care at all. They could care less. Like I said, they'll buy fully automatic guns that come up through Mexico, or they'll alter ones from here. But they're not going to say, oh, you know what, guys, hey, Washington State Legislature just passed a new law, guys. It says we have to only have magazines that carry 10 rounds. And they're going to say, oh, damn, yeah. All these terrorists are going to be like, you know what? All right, let's get rid of all our extra, you know, our surefire mags, 100-round mags. Let's just get a bunch of little 10-round ones. Do you think that happens? Do you think that, like, terrorists and criminals have a, like, oh, well, let's try to make this a clean crime, guys, and not violate all the laws? I mean, give me a break. What kind of fantasy island do these folks live in? But Anyway, I'll let you hear for yourself, but for me, my own personal opinion, I think they probably will get their way. I mean, that's what happens when the inmates are running the asylum. The Democrats run Washington State, so in no time it'll look an awful lot like California. So, but please listen to the audio from the hearings today and let me know what you think in the comments below.
That I wanted to make at the outset. So first, we have a lot of high emotion and a lot of public interest in these issues. I'm going to ask that everybody respect our process here. We're not going to have clapping, we're not going to have shouting, we're not going to have outbursts, we're going to have calm conversation and people bringing forth the perspective of the public on these 5 proposals to those of us here on the committee. If we have any of those problems, I'm going to be asking security to remove people from the room. We have plenty of people in other rooms or outside who haven't gotten a chance to sit down and watch. The other thing that I'm going to say is unfortunately we have far more people who have signed in wanting to testify than we are going to have time to hear from in the next couple of hours. My plan is to have staff presentations and statements from the prime sponsors on the first 3 bills together. People who have signed in on any one of those will be invited up and can testify on 1, 2, or all 3 of those bills. We will continue working on those 3 bills until about 11:15. At 11:15, we'll conclude the hearings on those 3 bills and move to consideration of 5463. We'll work on that for about half an hour, and then we'll leave the last 15 minutes for 6146. The Alliance for Gun Responsibility and the National Rifle Association have given us panels that will be the folks who testify first on each of the bills. The folks who are panelists will have 2 minutes and will be adhering to the timer strictly. After that, we will use as much more time as we can for members of the public to come up and testify. And they'll be given 1 minute each. The last thing that I would say, and this is just as a gentle reminder to my colleagues up here, this is a public hearing. If there are questions, particularly for staff, that absolutely can't wait because you won't be able to follow the discussion that ensues, you should feel free to ask those questions. But please remember that all the time that we consume with that takes away from the opportunity for members of the public to share their views with us. With that, let's go ahead and bring up staff to give us presentations on our first 3 measures.
Good morning, Chair Peterson, members of the committee. For the record, Shani Bauer, staff counsel to this committee. I have brought Tim with me today. I'm having some coughing issues this morning, and if that happens, I'm going to hand it over and do that as seamlessly as possible for you. Senate Bill 5992 is relating to trigger modification devices. On October 1st, 2017, several people were killed and several hundred were wounded in Las Vegas, Nevada, when a shooter used 1 or more assault-type rifles affixed with a bump stock device. Since that time, the regulation of bump stock devices has been a topic of national interest, and that is what we are talking about here today. Bump firing is the act of using the recoil of a semi-automatic firearm to fire shots in rapid succession. It is my understanding you do not need a bump fire stock in order to achieve that with a rifle. There are YouTube videos on achieving that with a rubber band or a belt loop, or even just holding the rifle loosely. However, a bump fire stock was developed in order to allow the shooter to attain some level of accuracy and control. I have handed out a diagram for you today. It looks like this, and I don't take credit for it. It comes from the Los Angeles Times, but to give you an idea of what one looks like. Currently in Washington State, it is unlawful for any person to sell, purchase, or possess a machine gun. Any machine gun or its parts are declared to be contraband and may be seized by law enforcement. A machine gun is defined as any firearm or mechanism not requiring the trigger to be pressed with each shot, having a clip or other device for storing ammunition, and capable of firing more than 5 shots per second. The manufacture, sale, purchase, or possession of a machine gun is a Class C felony. While a bump fire stock can achieve firing at that rate, it is technically not considered a machine gun because it technically requires a trigger pull with that recoil action. So this bill uses the terminology trigger modification device. Trigger modification device is defined as any part or combination of parts designed or intended to accelerate the rate of fire of a firearm, but does not convert the firearm into a machine gun. There are two parts. It's any part that is designed to use the recoil of the firearm to produce a rapid succession of trigger functions, or any part that is designed to produce multiple trigger functions through the use of an external mechanism. Effective July 1, 2018, it is unlawful for any person to manufacture or sell a trigger modification device. As of July 1, 2019, it is unlawful for any person to manufacture or sell, or in addition possess, any trigger modification device, or to assemble or repair any trigger modification device. All trigger modification devices are declared to be contraband and may be seized by law enforcement whenever found. These are all the same requirements for a machine gun. The manufacture, sale, purchase, or possession of a trigger modification device is a Class C felony and a seriousness level 3. Using such a device in the commission or furtherance of a felony is a Class A felony and is seriousness level 7.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for Shani on the first one? And Shani, I'm going to have you pause because Senator Vanderwyk is here out of Healthcare Committee, so I'm going to have him just come up and make a brief statement. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Peterson. Kevin Vanderwyk from the 24th Legislative District, beautiful Olympic Peninsula. Thank you for that wonderful staff briefing. This is my bill, and I hope you guys pass it. It's, as Shani mentioned, this can take bump stocks can take a semi-automatic rifle and make them essentially fully automatic rifle. And we have had laws against both federal laws against fully automatic rifles in this state, and the state has not taken any action to allow fully automatic rifles in the state for a long time. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring this bill forward. I'm a lifetime NRA member and consider myself a pretty big defender of the Second Amendment, and have a lot of friends and coworkers that are also NRA members and gun enthusiasts, and I've talked to a lot of them about it, and we all agree that this is something that shouldn't be allowed. This is something that probably should have never been allowed to be used in the state in the first place, and I also don't think there's a lot of them out there. So I think now, after the tragedy in Las Vegas, now's the time to take action about them and to close them down. They are not an expensive apparatus, but Chair Peterson, I think you're aware that Senator Rolfes has expressed maybe a desire to have some sort of buyback program around them, and I think that might be a fine idea. As Shani mentioned, they become illegal to have in your possession July 1st of 2019. So if you do go down that road of a buyback program, we could do it, I think, 1 of 2 days. We can have a budget proviso in our budget next year, and I think that would only need to be for a couple of months, or you can amend the bill here to establish some sort of buyback program. I would just, if you end up doing that, make sure it's done in a way where somebody couldn't game the system, because these aren't very expensive. So if we offered them for $100 and somebody was to get them for $75, somebody can make a lot of money off a buyback program. So maybe limit how many people can turn in. And then I think also it's important to line up the dates so that it is fluid. So if we do a budget proviso next year, you might need to bump back that July 1st, 2019 date a couple of months, because if we do a budget proviso, the buyback program would start the same day they become illegal to have in your possession, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for being here.
Yes, of course.
Back to healthcare. Okay, Shani, please proceed.
Next is Senate Bill 6049 regarding high-capacity magazines. A high-capacity magazine ban is a law which bans or otherwise restricts detachable firearm magazines that can hold more than a certain number of rounds of ammunition. In 1994, Congress passed a federal assault weapons ban, which included limits regarding magazines holding more than 10 rounds. That law expired in September of 2004 because of a sunset, and it has not been renewed. At least 8 states and a number of local governments ban or regulate magazines that they have legally defined as high capacity, generally holding between 10 and 20 rounds of ammunition. At this time, no court has overturned a ban on high-capacity guns or magazines, and in March 2015, the Federal Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the magazine capacity ban. This bill defines large-capacity magazines. Generally, a large-capacity magazine is an ammunition feeding device with the capacity to hold more than 10 rounds of ammunition or any combination of parts from which such a device can be assembled. No person in the state may manufacture, possess, sell, purchase, or otherwise transfer a large-capacity magazine except as specifically provided. The statute contains a list of several exemptions. I'm not going to go through all of those, but most noteworthy, the prohibition does not apply to a person who possessed a large-capacity magazine on the effective date of this section or who acquires possession by operation of law upon the death of a person. Possession by any government officer, agency, or employee, members of the armed forces or law enforcement. Transfer possession for the purpose of permanently relinquishing the magazine to law enforcement, or the importation or possession for lawful participation in a sporting event or lawfully engaged in shooting at a shooting range. In order to continue to possess the magazine on the effective date of this section, the person possessing it must store it in secure gun storage and possess it only on property owned or immediately controlled by the person while engaged in the legal use of the magazine at a duly licensed firing range or while engaged in lawful outdoor recreational activity. Secure gun storage is defined. A person who unlawfully possesses a large capacity magazine is guilty of a gross misdemeanor. Any questions on that one?
Looks like no, so please proceed.
Okay. Moving on to proposed substitute Senate Bill 5444 on the enhanced background checks for assault weapons. As my intro suggests, we are hearing the proposed substitute to this bill and not the original bill. Generally, a background check is required to purchase a firearm either from a dealer or a private party to ensure the person is eligible to purchase that firearm. The type of background check will depend on the type of gun being purchased. For a rifle or long gun, the purchaser must pass a background check conducted through the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, or NICST. If the person is purchasing a pistol, the purchaser must undergo a state background check in addition to the NICST check required by federal law. A state background check includes a check of the Washington State Patrol databases, the Department of Licensing Firearms database, and state and local mental health agencies. A dealer may not deliver a firearm to a purchaser until all of those background checks have been completed or 10 business days have passed since the dealer requested the background check. If the purchaser has a valid concealed pistol license already, the dealer is only required to do the NICST check because they have gone through that state background check process as part of the licensing process. An application for a pistol purchase must include identifying information of the applicant and a description of the firearm. A signed application constitutes a waiver of confidentiality for purposes of the release of information by mental health facilities and other providers. A record of the pistol transfer must be retained by the dealer for 6 years, and a copy must be submitted to the Department of Licensing, which keeps that information in its firearms database. Firearm transfers between private persons must be completed through a dealer to ensure the proper background checks are completed. So for this bill, it defines assault weapon. That does include pistols in that definition, but for the most part we are carving out a piece for rifles and long guns that will be required to have the pistol background check process. So the requirements for the purchase of an assault weapon is aligned with the provisions for the purchase of a pistol in state law. A dealer may not deliver an assault weapon to a purchaser unless the purchaser has passed both a state and federal background check. If the purchaser does not have a concealed pistol license, the dealer must forward the application for purchase to law enforcement for processing. Other procedural requirements that apply to the sale or transfer of a pistol also apply to the sale or transfer of an assault weapon. An application for purchase must include identifying information of the applicant and a description of the firearm. A signed application constitutes a waiver of confidentiality for the purposes of the release of information. A record of the transfer must be retained by the dealer for 6 years and a copy submitted to DOL for inclusion in their database. A person who acquired the firearm upon the death of the former owner must transfer possession or notify the Department of Licensing that they intend to retain possession within 60 days. And a person between 18 and 21 years of age may only possess the firearm on private property. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for Shane? Okay. Senator Fox, would you like to speak briefly to your bills?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing this suite of bills forward today for hearings in this committee. This is the first time in recent memory that we've been able to have a discussion on these bills, though they've been offered in previous years. And for that reason, though I know there are strong passions from proponents and opponents, I think the hearing today is very significant. As the sponsor, I'm proud to be the sponsor and have worked with the Attorney General on Senate Bill 5444 and Senate Bill 6049. And as to the changes in 5444, I believe that bringing background checks related to assault weapons into conformity with those we afford to pistols and handguns makes absolute sense, and it's supported in polling both in this state and nationally. I would note that none of the bills we're hearing today would ban the sale or possession of assault rifles in this state. Senate Bill 6049 would make Washington the 9th state, 10th if you count the District of Columbia, to prohibit the sale of high-capacity magazines. And significantly, this legislation has been modified to make the penalty a gross misdemeanor rather than a felony. And I know, as Shani stated, that both the 2nd Circuit, the 4th Circuit, the 9th Circuit, and the 10th Circuit federal courts of appeals have all upheld this type of legislation as meeting the Heller test for reasonable regulations. I believe that with every exchange, when a magazine has to be changed out, there is a possibility that the gun will jam or the shooter will fail to successfully load the magazine, affording an opportunity for escape or for the shooter to otherwise be stopped by law enforcement or others. And so the bottom line is this bill is intended to have less people killed in mass shootings in this state or in this country. And that is why I think it's so significant, and we will be hearing today from victims from the Las Vegas shooting, who I think will be able to speak to what that was like for them. And we know that in the Gabby Giffords case many years ago, that it was the pause when the shooter was changing out the clip that allowed that shooter to be jumped. It was a horrible tragedy, but it's, I think, in my view, more people may have been killed in that situation, and we ought to do what we can to prevent these horrible situations from being worse than they otherwise would be. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak to these bills today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Front. So we will begin with a pro panel on the first 3 bills: Adam Cornell, Brian Walters, and Anne Marie Parsons. If you could come up. If the first panel on the con side could get ready, that'll be Kelly Hopkins, Brett Bass, and Alan Gottlieb. For all of those who are going to be testifying on these first 3 bills, to help out staff, please indicate which bill you're speaking to, or if you're speaking to all of them, just indicate that, so that they can prepare the bill reports appropriately. And please proceed.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I'm Adam Cornell. I am a 15-plus year deputy prosecuting attorney with Snohomish County. The worst day of my career was when I was called to the scene of the Mukilteo mass shooting in July of 2016. I had a lot of bad days after that with the families of those victims, as well as the other victims who were at that party. I saw with my own eyes the human carnage from a jealous and angry 19-year-old man who had easy access to an assault rifle. On that day in July, it only took 35 seconds for 3 beautiful children's lives to be ruined. The lives of the kids at that party, their families, and the community of Mukilteo. I was the prosecutor who handled that case. It should not have been so easy for this angry 19-year-old to purchase an assault rifle. An assault rifle that he didn't intend to use for hunting animals. It was an assault rifle that he used with the intention of hunting humans. And that's exactly what he did. It certainly should not have been easier for the gunman in that case to buy a rifle than it was for him to purchase a firearm. These are weapons that are designed to inflict the most carnage possible, and they do so very quickly. We talked a lot in Mukilteo over the years since this happened, of being Mukilteo strong, and the community was shaken to its core. Mukilteo is strong, but it can be stronger. Please have the strength to pass this bill.
Thank you very much. Good modeling. For those who, as you watch, the timer will stay green until minute 30 has elapsed. The last 30 seconds it'll be yellow, so please be wrapping up, and then when it turns red, please conclude your sentence. Thank you. Please proceed.
Morning, members of the committee. My name is Brian Walters, and I work for the Department of Corrections as a probation officer. I've been a probation officer for 3 years, and I've worked for the department for 5. I was advised to say to you guys that I am not representing the Department of Corrections. I'm just coming here as my own individual self. My job duties are after offenders released from prison or jail. I supervise them and make sure they're doing the right thing and get them in treatment and all that stuff. A lot of the cases that probation officers have is assault weapon charges. Some of the duties that we have to do is enter the homes of violent offenders, and some of them have weapons on them. Most of them are assault weapons, and it's very terrifying entering to a home that they may have weapons. So I strongly believe in the right to have a weapon. You know, as long as you're law-abiding and you have your head on straight, the background check should happen, you know, and then some training should happen, because if law enforcement people have to do that, then others should as well. I feel like it would save a lot of lives.
Could you conclude, please?
And if you care about lives and I care about lives, then this bill should be passed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please proceed.
Thank you for having me. My name is Anne Marie Parsons. I am here with my husband Jim, my daughter Lindsay, and my son Jeff. We are Washington residents. On October 1st of this year, my daughter Carrie Parsons was murdered in Las Vegas in the mass shooting. Saying that is very hard for me. I spent most of my time down there talking to coroners and morticians and funeral directors. We just wanted to get our daughter home, our family home. Carrie was killed by an AR-15 assault rifle that was fitted with a bumper slide modification. This information was given to me by an FBI agent. assigned to us. I don't know much about guns personally. The bumper slide modification applied to the gun that killed my daughter is also known as a trigger modification. Without the modification, an AR-15, according to the manufacturer, shoots 45 rounds per minute. So a little, roughly, 1 round per second, a little less than that. According to the audio recordings taken the night of the Las Vegas shooting, the bump stock modification on the AR-15 that murdered Carrie increased the gun's rate of fire to 9 rounds per second. Think of that. A 30-round magazine could be emptied in just over 3 seconds. You don't have to be a good marksman for this gun to kill 58 people and injure 500. No one was targeted. They were all mowed down. Nobody stood a chance. If the gun was in the room right now, none of us could run fast enough. This can be prevented.
Could you wrap up, please?
This can be prevented. I beg you to please pass legislation that will prevent this from happening to other innocent people, to your son or your wife or your grandchild or your daughter. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for sharing your stories. We'll bring up our first con panel, Keely Hopkins, Brett Bass, and Alan Gottlieb. If the next pro panel could be ready, Beatrice Seward, Christina Brinch, and Zach Almond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Alan Gottlieb, and I'm here today speaking on behalf of 20,000 plus members of the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms in Washington State, which is a national gun rights lobbying group with over 603,000 members nationwide. I'm here to speak in opposition to Senate Bills 5992, 6049, and 5444. With regard to Senate Bill 5992, the trigger devices, this bill prohibits possession of so-called trigger devices that allegedly increase the rate of fire of some semi-automatic firearms. While the bill references bump stocks, it goes far beyond those devices. These devices do not turn a semi-automatic firearm into a machine gun. In fact, sometimes it lowers the rate of firepower and accuracy, as happened to the horrible shooter in Las Vegas, whose bump stocks jammed the firearms, and as a result, he had to put them down and pick up other guns to fire with. So there's a lot of misinformation with regard to what they really can do and accomplish. With regard to the magazine bill 6049, it prohibits the future sale and transfer of magazines with a capacity of more than 10 rounds. These are not high-capacity magazines. They're simply standard capacity magazines as originally designed for and provided with certain firearms. They've been used for well over a half a century in a variety of rifles and pistols. They're most commonly used in rifle competitions sanctioned by the federal government and our state. The governor signs the governor's 20 certificates each year for the top 10 competitive rifle and pistol shooters in the state. The greater impact of the magazine ban will be on handgun owners. More than 500,000 Washington residents are licensed to carry a concealed handgun for the personal protection, and preferred firearm is a semi-automatic pistol. The most popular selling handguns these days almost all have capacity magazines over 10 rounds. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chair Peterson, members of the committee, my name is Keely Hopkins, State Liaison for the National Rifle Association, here today in opposition to Senate Bill 5444, 5992, and 6049. Semi-automatic firearms are some of the most commonly owned firearms in the United States and are used for the very same purposes as other firearms, for self-defense, home protection, hunting, recreational, and competitive shooting. Despite being some of the most commonly owned, semi-automatic firearms are only used in a very small percent of violent crime. Police reports and studies have found these so-called assault weapons are only used in 1 to 2% of violent crimes. Looking at 5 years of recent data, there are 9 times as many murders with knives, blunt objects, and hands and feet as there are with rifles of any type, yet semi-automatic rifles remain the target of assault weapons legislation. Here in Washington, according to data from the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs, Rifles of any kind are only used in roughly 3% of violent crimes in the state, with semi-automatic rifles being just a small subset of that percentage. The same goes for commonly owned standard capacity magazines. A standard manufacturer-supplied magazine generally holds more than 10 rounds. These so-called large capacity magazines make up about half of all of magazines owned in the United States. Following the magazine ban at the federal level, a congressional study found that the 10-round limit on magazines had no impact on crime, and it did not have an effect on multiple victim crimes. Treating semi-automatic firearms and standard capacity magazines differently under the state law will do nothing to impact crime in the state, but will only limit law-abiding gun owners and their ability to utilize them for self-defense purposes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please proceed.
Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, thank you. My name is Brett Bass. I'm a firearms instructor at Bellevue Gun Club and a U.S. Marine Reservist. I'd like to speak in opposition to these things, and I'll speak briefly so that we can cede more time. First and foremost, I'd also like to commend everybody here for the civility of the dialogue that we're having and the openness with which we're having this conversation, because I know this is a contentious topic and it deserves to be, so thank you very much. The fourth universal rule of safe firearms handling, as defined by Colonel Jeff Cooper, who founded the American Pistol Institute in 1967, is to be sure of your target plus what is around and beyond it. You have to be able to identify what it is your objective is and prevent any collateral damage, things that are not that. The problem with the term assault weapon is that it is not a technical definition, and it is frequently conflated with the term assault rifle. The first person to popularize this was a gentleman named Josh Sugarman, who worked for the Violence Policy Center, whose intent in popularizing the term assault weapon was to allow the conflation between the term assault weapon and assault rifle. An assault rifle, as defined by the U.S. Army Field Manual, is a type of machine gun under federal law. And so in discussing so-called assault weapons, which have cosmetic features which can be changed at the whim of people, as opposed to technical definitions, it opens things up to a Pandora's box, which is not good. Even manually operated firearms, such as lever-action rifles, are considered to be assault weapons in some states. This is technology from the 1800s, so that's the first problem. The second is that, according to the research that I've done, which is necessary for my job, teaching people to defend themselves with firearms, the statistical average number of assailants in a home invasion is 3, with rare instances up to 4. Guns that hold more ammunition are more useful for individual people defending themselves against multiple bad guys than the opposite scenario with one lone gunman attacking multiple people that cannot defend themselves. Finally, I can't find any statistical data showing a single instance in Washington State where the discharge of an 11th or 12th round of ammunition resulted in a firearm death or injury that otherwise would not have taken place without a reload taking place as well. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll bring up the next pro panel, Beatrice Seward, Christina Brinch, and Zach Elmore. The next con panel will be Bill Burris, Phil Watson, and Phil Shaves. If you could be on deck, that would be great. Please proceed.
My name is Beatrice Seward. I live in Tacoma. I am a veteran of 25 years of the Army. I'm a single mom of 3 adult daughters and an educated constituent who's also a responsible gun owner. I'm asking to, I'm asking today to have the background checks for these dangerous assault weapons. The service gave me the opportunity to learn about assault weapons that most civilians don't know. And based on that knowledge that I learned through the military, I strongly urge stricter regulations and background checks before someone can add their dangerous assault weapons to their arsenal. I've lost my husband, my uncle, my brother, and friends to gun violence, and the pain of those losses stay with me forever. My request and hope is that by sharing my thoughts, my concerns, and my heartbreak, that it'll make a difference. That by passing the proposition legislation for the assault weapons, SB 5444, to require background checks to prevent senseless deaths for families, friends, and coworkers. The fact that each tragedy caused by the assault weapons, dangerous assault weapons, is worse in this country's history isn't an accident. It's a decision by someone that they made to destroy as many lives as possible. Currently, it's easier to get an assault weapon than it is to get a handgun or for personal protection, and I hope that changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Christina Brink. I live in Port Townsend, which is the most beautiful city in the entire state. Thank you for considering legislation that is vital to the safety and morale of our people. As a U.S. Army officer, I learned how to safely handle, store, and I enjoyed shooting. As an intensive care unit nurse and nurse practitioner at Harborview Medical Center for 10 years, I witnessed the consequences of gun misuse. The blood and holes in human skin, the swollen bodies from IV fluids and countless blood products, and families torn with unimaginable guilt and lifelong grief. I know that if every member of this committee had lost a child, all would be in favor of common sense gun laws. I also have an immediate family member with a serious brain disorder or mental illness. If my brother had had a weapon at his time of crisis, he would not be alive today. The innocent and unstable must not have access to or keep firearms. They may be a danger to others, but more often they are their own safety is at risk. I also believe in education. We need training. We need training to drive. Let's include guns as dangerous as cars and empower people with knowledge. Again, thank you for improving the lives of Washington residents.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Good morning, Chair Peterson and committee. My name is Zach Elmore. I live in District 36. I have my mom and my sister here with me today, and I'm part of the Everytown Survivor Network. Really, I'm here today because my sister survived the most deadly mass shooting in modern American history, and it's past time that we ban these conversion kits that allow these assault weapons to become even more dangerous. October 1st, I was celebrating my birthday at a Seahawks game and received the most terrifying call of my life. My mom and I hopped on a plane the next day to Las Vegas, and we were greeted by Alicia's husband, Nick, who still had blood on his hands from the night before. The shirt that he used to try to stop her bleeding was in a black bag on the floor. Seeing my sister motionless from a gunshot wound and surgery to check for organ damage is something I wish nobody ever had to experience. The terror she describes of that night, it's absolutely heartbreaking. The man standing directly next to my brother-in-law was shot and killed. They watched it happen. As they ran, she was shot in the back. In all that chaos, she managed to text my mom and grandma potential goodbyes and asked that grandma would tell her daughters that she loved them. The shooter that night fired 1,100 rounds in about 10 minutes. He wounded 600 people. He killed 58. He used bump stocks. He attached them to already deadly assault weapons and made them mimic automatic fire. As our elected officials, I believe it's your responsibility to prioritize the lives of your constituents over the agenda of the gun lobby. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll now bring up Bill Burris, Phil Watson, and Phil Shave. And if the next panel could be ready, Emily Cantrell and Kyle Helms, Kimi Nolte, and Kelly Bernardo.
Okay, I'll start. Thank you, Chairman. My name is Phil Watson. I represent the Firearms Policy Coalition. I'm a lifelong resident of Washington State and Army Reserve veteran. First, on PSSB 5444, three main points. It recasts the definition of semi-automatic long guns to politically charged and made-up terms historically used to define fully automatic weapons, not semi-automatic weapons. Number two, it could possibly ban the sale to Americans from other states and possession for 18 to 21-year-olds, even those serving in the United States military. Number three, it leaves all private information with the scandal-ridden DOL, which seems to have a low regard for the privacy of Washington residents. SP 5992, the so-called bump stock ban, bans any part or combination of parts, internal or external, not just bump stocks. This bill could be used as a ban on much more than just external trigger devices like bump stocks. Number two, a modification of a trigger itself to shoot fully automatic is already illegal. Number three, it could possibly ban anything, even the very common and legal parts and gunsmithing work that could make the dwell time between trigger shots even slightly shorter. For example, the very common and renowned Geisley trigger, which I use on my own firearms. Lastly, in 6049, Constitution, unconstitutional taking of commonly owned, constitutionally protected property without just compensation. And number two on 6049, there is zero evidence a law of this kind stops criminals that choose to disobey other laws, leaving all law-abiding citizens at a clear disadvantage to any would-be criminals or attackers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Philip Shave. Today I testify on behalf of the Washington Arms Collectors. I'm retired after 34 years in law enforcement. I have a state-issued concealed pistol license, and I will address many of the concerns of our about 600,000 Washington citizens who also possess a CPL. As I read Substitute Senate Bill 5444, I found myself back in high school English class, reminded of a teacher who required us to read and discuss George Orwell's 1984. To quote Orwell, "It's a beautiful thing, this destruction of words." He was describing newspeak or doublespeak, and Senate Bill 5444 would take this corruption of language and incorporate it into the law. The bill claims to address assault weapons. It does not. Instead, it takes ordinary firearms that are legitimately owned by millions of Americans and redefines them into something they are not. Assault weapons do exist. Their definition is commonly understood. They're fully automatic firearms used by the military and in Washington state only by the police. Assault weapons have been federally regulated since 1934 and prohibited in Washington since 1994 except for law enforcement. 5444 casually takes ordinary firearms and through the magic of doublespeak would make them into something they are not. For the record, let me state the obvious. The rifles that possess many of the features that 5444 includes in its definitions have been owned and used by the public since the 1960s. They have been used as sporting rifles, target rifles, and home defense firearms. They are not assault weapons. In their attempt to ban the broadest array of firearms, the drafters of 5444 have included some pretty silly and harmless things. Thumbhole stocks, threaded barrels, muzzle brakes that reduce recoil, barrel shrouds. I know firearms. I spent 18 years training them to law enforcement, and these things are not dangerous, and they do not make an assault weapon. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is William Burris. I'm a retired Pierce County Sheriff's Department detective. I'm here today representing the Gun Owners Action League, and I'm speaking in sort of support for 5992, but also opposition. The number of so-called bump stocks in this state is fairly limited. I'm fairly involved in the firearms community. I know 2 people in the state that have them. They're not particularly accurate. I would dare say it's the least popular item in the pro-gun community to be worried about in this particular series of events. But I would like to caution that this does need to make sure that the wording doesn't restrict traditional trigger jobs or action jobs, which are designed to make the gun more accurate and smoother to operate. Smoothness and accuracy are safety issues. And as has already been mentioned here, outlawing illegally owned property does require some compensation for the people that have purchased them. So to those who look forward to buying a bump stock, I'm kind of disappointing you because I don't think there's a real urge to keep those around now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, our next pro panel, Emily Cantrell and Kyle Helms, Kimi Nolte, and Kelly Bernardo.
Thank you for having me. My name is Emily Cantrell, and I came down from Seattle today to represent myself and share how on October 1st, 2017, gun violence forever changed my life. My fiance Kyle and I went to Vegas for our 3rd annual Route 91 Harvest Festival. As we danced to Jason Aldean, we heard firecrackers. As the next noise began again, and a woman dropped next to us with blood on her leg, the darkening reality sank in that bullets, not firecrackers, were spraying us. The music went silent and the screaming began. Our country's deadliest mass shooting would ensue. We were sitting ducks with no way to fight back. We ran, we dived, and with each new round of bullets pouring down on us, my emotions changed from being scared to having complete hatred to whoever was doing this, to wondering when we were all going to die. Kyle and I separated, and his best friend ran with me. I fell and thought my life was over. Bullets whizzed by my head and rained over my body. We crawled under a fence and entered what we later learned was the airport perimeter. We hid in a shed and in an airport hangar, fearing for our lives. It was hours until I saw Kyle again. The rest of the world woke up to the horrific details, knowing when it began, who the gunman was, when it ended, how long it lasted, how many victims died. For the 22 others directly involved in the shooting, when the rest of the world thought we were okay and safe, that was far from the truth. Even if you survive, safe is not something you can relate to. I struggle with survivor's guilt. I'm terrified when the sun goes down. Any little noise makes me jump or cry. I look for a gunman in any room I enter. Even though I don't have a bullet in my head or body, I feel like I have one. I cannot comprehend how our country has allowed mass shootings to become normal. My story is just one of 22,000 that came out of Las Vegas alone. I ask that you consider each one of these bills today: 5992, 6049, 5444, before you and your loved ones have a story of your own to tell. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm going to interrupt for just a second. I neglected to announce the next panel of Sean Yanity, Kelly Burr, Jane Milhans, and David Westhaver. Be ready on deck. They'll be the next folks called up. Please proceed.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, my name is Kyle Helms, and I am from Seattle. I'm lucky to be here today representing myself due to the events that happened on October 1st, 2017 in Las Vegas, Nevada. Just after 10 p.m. that dreadful night, I found myself, my fiancée Emily, my best friend Josh of 33 years, and his wife in the middle of our country's worst mass shooting. As you can imagine, the Las Vegas shooting has had a major impact on my life. Why did I survive? Better yet, why did we survive? We survived due to wise decisions and pure luck. I'm testifying here today to give you a clear perspective of the destruction of assault weapons. The physical wounds I saw that evening varied from bumps and bruises all the way to gunshot wounds to the heart. And yes, I saw everything in between. Who do you stop and help? A woman shot in the chest and not breathing, or the hundreds of people I saw hiding who were looking for some type of security? Assault weapons took multiple lives that night. I did my best to keep one of the victims I helped alive, but he was shot in the heart, and although he was conscious, did not make it in the end. Due to this experience, I battle survivor's guilt every day. What could I have done differently? Could I have helped more victims? Fast forward to a time where these weapons are not accessible to private citizens. I am testifying here today in support of bills 5444, 5992, 6049, as they will help us move towards a safer world where mass shootings no longer occur. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, together, let's help end these shootings. Nobody should have to see the physical destruction assault rifles can have, and nobody should have to suffer the mental angst I do today. I appreciate your support for these bills, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Please proceed.
Hello, my name is Kimmy Nolte, and I live and work in Everett, Washington. In my job as a victim services coordinator, I help crime victims cope with the trauma they've experienced. Oftentimes, this trauma involves gun violence and a lot of times death. Because of confidentiality, I cannot identify specific clients or discuss telling circumstances of cases, but I do want to bring your attention and awareness to the cost of mass shootings in Washington and the impact assault weapons have on our communities. In my job, I work with general crime victims in Snohomish, Island, Skagit, Whatcom, and King counties. The families I work with have lost loved ones in area shootings like Mukilteo and Cascade Mall shooting, but also in the Las Vegas shooting. The reach of these mass shootings is wide and has destroyed entire communities and devastated families. Even if a person does survive being shot with an assault weapon, the physical and mental trauma is significant, and survivors must grieve the changes in their life. I've witnessed the challenges of one woman whose son was shot with an assault weapon in a drive-by shooting. Her son miraculously survived, but he's now quadriplegic and spends most of his time in the hospital because of his injuries. She lost her job because she missed too many days of work taking care of her son. She's a single mom with other children, and this crime has forever changed her family's life. Today, in our state, it is as easy to buy an assault weapon as it is to buy a traditional hunting rifle. It is easier to get an assault weapon in our state than it is to get a handgun. This needs to change, and we have the opportunity to make that change now. Thank you for your time and attention on this important policy. I know it will save lives.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Kelly Bernardo, and I live in Issaquah in the 5th Legislative District with my husband and 4 kids. My husband is a retired military officer, and I'm currently employed as an ER nurse. I am here to express my opinion on a common-sense gun safety law from my perspective as an ER nurse, a former police officer, a gun owner, and most of all, as a mother. I am asking you to pass the Enhanced Assault Weapons Background Check Bill. As a nurse, I am required to go through annual training, not only with my hospital where I am employed, but to maintain my license with the state. Why? The number one reason is patient safety. Better patient outcome is another, and frankly, it makes me a smarter, better nurse. Hunters are required to attend a hunter safety class in order to be licensed, and we are all safer because of it. However, my neighbor, who has never touched a gun in her life, can walk into a gun shop and walk out with a high-powered rifle without any expectation if she can even load or unload it safely, much less hit what she intends to shoot. As an ER nurse, I see patients experiencing mental health emergencies daily. People's situations change. Marriages and relationships fall apart. Sometimes there's assaultive behavior, arrests are made, and protective orders may be put into place. These are some examples of why we need annual background checks. If I want to volunteer in my kids' schools, I have to undergo an annual background check. It makes sense to me that we require the same of people who choose to own powerful firearms that are capable of being used to kill many people in short amounts of time. Our nation's Army physicians train civilian trauma staff in saving people's lives who have been shot. It's shameful to me that this is necessary, and it is necessary on a daily basis in our country. As elected officials, you can take steps today to change this, and I thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Sean Yanity, Kelly Burr, Jane Milhans, David Westhaver. And we're going to bring up the Attorney General after that panel. Please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee. My name is Sean Yanity, Chairman of the Stillaguamish Tribe of Indians. And we're very concerned about lives that are lost also. We understand the trauma of violence, what it does to the families. Violence in any country is pretty rampant. And Washington State could also help be more proactive other than just banning equipment, rifles, and ammunition, or magazines, excuse me, and provide more education, more awareness, especially through schools. I teach my children and our tribal children in the summertime. We have a summer program, and they learn a firearm as a tool. You hunt with it, it takes a life. You respect that. You don't hurt anybody, you respect people, you respect life. For expanded background checks, we have a system that has flaws. From what I've read and what I've seen, that we have data for the military that doesn't get to the system. We also have data in tribal courts that do not make it to this system. Washington State does not recognize protection orders from Indian country. That needs to change. So we oppose all the bills proposed today. we feel that there's other avenues and things that the state can do to protect citizens and also honor firearms. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, members of the panel and chairman. My name is Dave Westhaver. I'm from Bellevue, and there's been some powerful testimony from people who are victims of the mass shooting down in Las Vegas. I myself, when I was 15, got caught in the middle of a gunfight over in Bremerton and actually saw a man die right on the street there. But that hasn't changed my opinion about the firearms and my opposition to these bills. These bills are not going to affect the criminals. The only people these bills are going to affect are the law-abiding citizens. The criminals aren't going to be penalized by these bills. They're going to make criminals out of the law-abiding gun owners. If you really wanted to make an impact on firearm safety, why don't you start addressing the mental health issues and making mental health much more accessible to the general public and state-funded programs? I think that, when 3/4 of the firearm deaths are suicide, I think that would be a much more effective process. Also, Jenny Durkin was involved in the Safe Neighborhoods program back in 2006. And she effectively, when she was working as a federal prosecutor, she was able to effectively prosecute gangbangers and felons. To give you an example, King County, or Dan Satterberg, they'll get 18 months for a felon in possession of a firearm, but if on a federal charge, they'll get 10 years. She even admitted it was a very effective program, but it was curtailed due to politics. Programs like that are a much more effective way to legislate and to deal with gun violence. Thank you.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. My name is Jane Melhans. I live in Pierce County. Several years ago, I opened my front door and confronted 2 men in my home. These men were uninvited and their intentions were for harm. It is a woman's right to own firearms for personal protection. It levels the fight between her and an attacker. In my case, too. It gives her a fighting chance to survive. When seconds count and moments matter, a locked firearm or magazine is helpless in a personal defense situation. This bill, I stand before you as a crime survivor today. I don't want to be a crime statistic. I want to be able to protect myself. Because of this situation, I became a certified firearm instructor. Every year I volunteer hundreds of hours training women how to safely use a firearm for personal protection. The most popular rifle amongst women, I will say that women are the fastest growing firearm ownerships in America. And the rifle of choice for a woman is a modern sporting rifle, often referred to as an AR-15 or incorrectly categorized as an assault weapon. These are popular amongst women because we can adjust the stocks. They're not big and bulky, and they have little to recoil. We are law-abiding firearm owners. We're not the ones terrorizing Americans on killing sprees, and please don't seek to punish us. I live in fear that you'll take away my rights. I have alarm towers, cameras, leave the lights on, and I ask on behalf of all the women that you consider our rights to protect ourselves and punish criminals instead of us.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to come speak to you today. My name is Kelly Burr, and I live in the 45th District in Redmond. I'm here speaking in opposition of the proposed bans on high-capacity magazines and trigger modification devices. A lot of the things that I was planning to say today have already been said by others, so I'll stick to things that haven't been stated by others. I'm not here officially representing any group, but I will say that in representation of myself and several others I know who have physical challenges and disabilities, these bills would do undue harm to people with disabilities such as loss of a hand, partial or full, or someone like myself who struggles with significant muscle issues, trigger finger, carpal tunnel, etc. in my dominant hand. The idea of multiple trigger pulls of any weapon for self-defense leads to the possibility of my trigger finger locking up and not opening again. It causes significant pain. I have good days and bad days, but on bad days, I can't load a magazine. So I have to keep the magazines preloaded, and I need as many rounds in them as possible. And, you know, I still have this hand. I know a lot of people who don't have another hand or who only have a few fingers left on a hand. So the idea that banning high-capacity magazines will cause a bad guy to have to reload more often and reduce their ability to do harm or impair their ability to use that gun to do damage, there's no way we can impair the bad guy without impairing the good guy. And imagine trying to change a magazine with only one hand. This also goes for the bump stocks that I own and I use. It allows me to hold my finger steady and pull the rifle forward into my finger. With practice, I'm pretty accurate with it. I'm at any reasonable self-defense range, and these devices allow me to have pain-free operation of the firearm and continue to be able to bear arms in self-defense. Without this device, someone without a hand would need an articulating prosthetic that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. These can work with simple 3D printed prosthetics that are inexpensive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to bring up the Attorney General, since two of these are request bills. While he's coming up, the final pro panel is going to be Rory Graves, Jane Follansbee, and Michael Bell. If you could prepare, that'd be great. Please proceed.
Chairman Peterson, thank you so much. My name is Bob Ferguson, the Attorney General of the State of Washington. Joining me, not testifying, but here to answer questions if anyone has them, is Matt Thomas. He's an Assistant Attorney General in our Criminal Justice Division in the AG's office. And I'll speak to two of the bills that are before you now. First, I want to thank you on the assault weapons enhanced background checks to Senators Frocht and Darneal for co-sponsoring this legislation. We have circulated to the committee an 11-point PowerPoint providing an illustration of the military features that define an assault weapon, so you can see which weapons we are talking about. I won't give you many statistics, but I do want to say that assault weapons are far more likely to be used in a mass shooting, and when they are used, there will be more victims, both in casualties and in deaths. Yet despite these statistics, Washington State places fewer restrictions on assault weapons than we do on handguns. We prohibit those younger than 21 from purchasing handguns and require a waiting period of up to 10 days for all purchase of handguns so local law enforcement can perform an enhanced background check. In contrast, 18-year-olds can purchase assault weapons in Washington State. There is no waiting period required to purchase an assault weapon. So just to be clear, if any of us wish to purchase a handgun, we can walk into a Cabela's, but we cannot walk out with that handgun. An 18-year-old or a 19-year-old can walk into that Cabela's, purchase an assault weapon, and walk out with it. When I tell Washingtonians this, they look at me confused. It's the only issue I've ever worked on in my entire public career. When I explain it to a member of the media, they often said back to me, Bob, that can't be right. That can't be the law in our state. In July 2016, the hypothetical I gave you of a teenager walking into Cabela's to purchase an assault weapon happened. A 19-year-old walked into a Tulalip Cabela's and walked out with an assault weapon and a high-capacity magazine. A few days later, as you know, after reading the instruction manual in his car, he walked into a party and opened fire, murdering 3 teenagers, including his ex-girlfriend, and seriously wounding another. He fled only after emptying his high-capacity magazine.
I apologize, but can I have you...
Yes, so we encourage you to adopt that enhanced background check. Do I have to speak to the other bill, or?
I think we're just going to say the rest of
that. Is no, we appreciate your time, and I'll submit those informally to all of you. Thank you. So we know you're busy. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much
for the hearing. Thank you. Okay, so let's bring up Rory Graves, Jane Follansbee, and Michael Bell. We're going to be going down to 1 minute for these last 2 panels. And if the final con panel could get ready, Mark Meister, John Calhoun, and Larry Hamilton. Do we have Rory Graves, Jane Follansbee, or Michael Bell? Okay. Please proceed.
My name is Michael Bell.
I'm here.
If you could bring the microphone a little closer to your mouth, that'd be great.
I'm here to be the voice of my brother, Glenn Morgan Bell, who was shot and killed September 12, 1978. He was 15. It was after school on the way home to his friend or classmate talked me into going to his house, and in the house there was a handgun, a .44 Magnum, and my brother was shot point blank range. And I have been suffering through all these years with anger and just depression and a lot of that going in my head. I just wanted to say that I want to support the passing of the bills.
Thank you very much. Okay, last call for Rory Graves or Jane Follansby.
Hi, my name is Rory Graves. I live in Olympia, Washington. I have 3 children. And, my family's been impacted by gun violence. My mom is a survivor of a domestic violence shooting, and I've seen firsthand the damage that firearms can do in the wrong hands, which is why I'm a strong supporter of these bills. And I worry daily about, there's always news about another school shooting. I'm sending my 3 kids off to school. That's always in the back of my mind. Anything we can do to prevent these tragedies, I think, is just vital for keeping our community safe. And I hope that you can consider people in the community like me who, have experienced gun violence and worry about it every day when we're considering these bills. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So our final con panel, Mark Meister, John Calhoun, and Larry Hamilton, if you could come forward. Please proceed.
Thank you. My name is Mark Meister. I'm a lifelong citizen and resident of Washington State. I currently live in Woodinville, where I've been there since 1993. In the very short time we have left, I'd like to talk about something that I haven't heard anybody else speak about so far, and that is the constitutionality of the laws that you are proposing. Very briefly, I'd like to somewhat summarize Article 1, Section 24 of the Washington State Constitution, which is the right of the individual citizen to bear arms in defense of himself or the state shall not be impaired. It does continue on after that, but it does not affect individual rights. Part of what I would also like to point out is that every one of our representatives here in Washington does take an oath to support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of Washington State. And I would fully expect all of you to do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
Larry Hamilton. I'm a descendant of the patriots that founded this country. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I worked for several years as a state certified firearms instructor, teaching hunter education. And I want to address in particular, I'm against any of these measures, but particularly the one that says or gives local jurisdictions freedom to create their own firearms laws. Do you realize the chaos that will bring about? A person that's legal on this side of the street is illegal on the other side of the street because you happen to cross into the city or into the county or between cities or whatever. I mean, these bills need, there's some others also considering, excuse me, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And our final panelist, are you? Thank you.
Hello, my name is John Calhoun. I'm a member of
several different gun clubs. Tacoma Sportsman's Club, I'm a life member there, and I'm also a member of Tacoma Rifle and Revolver. I do many different shooting events, and I'm very involved in shooting. Most of these laws, it seems, are just doing nothing but tying the hands of us good law-abiding citizens. If we could use some of the laws that are already on the books and enforce all the rules that are already on the books, and punish the people that are doing wrong instead of punishing us, good people, you know, that would be a whole lot more to my advantage versus any of these new laws that we're putting in. It's kind of hard to get up here and talk. Everybody's already stated everything I was thinking about in the first place. Like I say, if we could just go ahead and punish the people that are doing wrong instead of punishing everybody for some of the bad ones, that would be much more benefit in my book. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of those who testified. I'm sorry that we don't have more time to spend on these three bills. We're going to move to a staff presentation on Senate Bill 5463. Mr. Ford.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. Tim Ford, staff with the committee. And before you is proposed substitute Senate Bill 5463 on blue paper in your binders. And it's an act that relates to protecting public safety through responsible storage of firearms. By way of background, certain individuals are prohibited from possessing firearms under federal and state law. I'm not going to go through the entire list, but it includes individuals with a felony conviction, or individuals with a conviction for certain domestic violence offenses, or individuals with certain protection orders, no contact orders, or restraining orders, individuals who've been involuntarily committed for 14 days or more, and certain minors. State firearm laws make it unlawful for a person to deliver a firearm to anyone whom the person has reasonable cause to believe is ineligible or prohibited under state law to possess a firearm. There are no laws currently specifically addressing criminal or civil liability for storing or leaving a firearm where a minor can obtain access to the firearm. To summarize the bill before you, it creates a duty for the safe storage of firearms, and that is a civil duty, not a criminal duty. There is also civil liability for violations of that duty that result in injury, death, or the commission of a crime, and it requires firearm dealers to offer to sell or give to a purchaser a lockbox or a device that prevents the firearm from discharging, and also to provide warnings to the purchaser of potential civil liability for unsafe storage of firearms.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for staff? Okay. We're going to bring up the first pro panel, Adrian Diaz, Dr. Thatcher Felt, and Liz Helmseth to speak. And on the con side, next we'll be bringing up Boyd Nealand, Keely Hopkins, and Ralph Myers. For these first two panels, we'll be at 2 minutes each, and after that we'll go to 1 minute. Please proceed.
Chairman Pedersen, members of the committee, my name is Adrian Diaz. I'm a lieutenant with the Seattle Police Department, and I have over 20 years of experience. I'm testifying today in strong support of the dangerous access prevention legislation. I want to be clear that I support the Second Amendment and personally own guns beyond my duty weapons. I also have 3 children and understand the vital necessity of keeping my guns responsibly and safely secured. Guns cause twice as many deaths in young people as cancer, 5 times as many deaths as heart disease, and 15 times as many deaths as infections. Unsecured guns in the home lead to some of the most tragic instances of children accidentally shooting themselves or their friends, and more than 75% of all youth suicide attempts are committed with a gun that was found in the home. I personally have been affected losing a friend when I was in middle school. Some of the most devastating tragedies include 65% of school shooters in the last 25 years were committed with guns from the shooter's home or relative's home. Yet in Washington, someone can leave out a loaded unlocked gun and face no legal consequence, even if a child finds it and is accidentally injured by the gun or harms someone else with it. We're not seeking criminalization, but strict liability holds people accountable without penalizing responsible gun owners. Similar bills in other states have reduced the rate of accidental and intentional shootings of children. At SPD, we are dedicated to reducing gun violence, providing additional tools to law enforcement and families informed common sense gun preventative laws, such as this is an important component to our efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Thatcher Felt, and I'm a pediatrician with the Yakima Valley Farm Workers Clinic. I practice in rural Grandview, and I'm a member of the Washington chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics, which serves over 1,000 pediatricians in Washington state. We strongly support Senate Bill 5463. As a community pediatrician, I am truly concerned by the scarcity of safe storage in my practice. Even more alarming to me are the number of kids that can tell me exactly where a gun is located. Every week, I find a home where firearms are kept unsecured and tragically open to young children. Fabian is a delightful first grader that I've followed since birth. At his last visit, I asked Fabian, "Is there a gun in your house?" Surprisingly, his answer was yes. This sweet 7-year-old knew that he had found a gun in the upstairs closet, and he knew that the bullets were on the top shelf. This gun was not secured. Fabian's inherent curiosity could have cost him his life. We can take a public health approach to solving this problem. We know what it takes to keep kids safe. Unintentional pediatric deaths fell by 23%, and youth suicides decreased in states with child access regulations. 2 youth between the ages of 10 and 24 kill themselves each week in Washington state, and firearms are a leading cause of suicide. Responsible storage of firearms should be the standard of care. Kids are simply not safe in homes where guns are left unsecured. It's time for action statewide. Please pass Senate Bill 5463. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Liz Jomseth. I live in Bellingham, the 40th District. I'm here today to testify in support of dangerous access prevention. Almost 6 weeks ago, my dad passed away. At the end, I sat next to his bed. He opened up his eyes and he said, "I'm sorry." And I said, "Dad, what are you sorry for?" And he said, "The gun." I knew what he was talking about. It was the 30-30 he brought for my brother for his 16th birthday. My brother wanted that gun more than anything, but before he could get it, he had to be prepared because we had a lot of rules. He took hunter safety courses, gun handling, and shooting courses. On top of that, my parents threatened him with severe punishment if the gun was used for anything other than hunting. So when my brother checked off all the boxes for being a responsible gun owner, my dad bought him the gun. It came home and took its place with all the other guns in my home, a place that could be easily accessed. No lock, no impediment, just strict rules between us and those guns. During a simple sibling fight, my brother got that gun to scare me. He carelessly pointed it at me and he pulled the trigger. I nearly died, and I've spent years recovering. My brother wasn't bad. He was a teenager. Teenagers are impulsive. They do things that we don't expect. My parents thought that they had done everything right, but they hadn't. That's why I'm here to support dangerous access prevention. If you're thinking my parents would have been prosecuted if this law was in place, you're wrong, because they are law-abiding citizens like most gun owners, and they would have stored their guns properly. And in the end, if they would have, my dad would have asked for my love rather than asking for my absolution from his guilt. Please move this legislation forward. Help law-abiding citizens by giving them tools to keep people safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our con panel, Boyd Nealand, Keely Hopkins, and Ralph Myers. And the next pro panel will be Nyla Fritz, Tony Gomez, and Ray Miller. Please proceed.
Chair Peterson, members of the committee, my name is Keely Hopkins, State Liaison for the National Rifle Association, here today in opposition to Senate Bill 5463. First off, I'd like to say that NRA supports and encourages firearms owners to store their firearms in a manner appropriate to their situation to prevent unauthorized access. In fact, our organization trains over 1 million gun owners each year on how to safely use and safely store firearms in a secure manner. We have over 125,000 instructors working on the ground throughout the country to ensure that firearms owners have education and training on this topic. Today, fatal firearm accidents are at an all-time low. While the number of privately owned firearms has quadrupled since 1930, the annual number of fatal firearm accidents has declined by 63%. Firearms are involved in 1.5% of accidental fatalities nationwide, and are only involved in 0.4%, that's less than 1/2 of 1%, of firearm accidents among children. Today, the odds are more than 1,000,000 to 1 against a child in the U.S. dying in a gun accident. While NRA encourages responsible and appropriate firearm storage, we have concerns with Senate Bill 5463, as it provides no protection for individuals who have their firearms stolen or acquired through illegal entry, theft, or burglary. A firearm owner should not be held liable for the crimes committed by a prohibited person who breaks into their home and steals their property. This type of liability blames the victim of a crime and then potentially subjects them to lawsuits, all because of the wrongdoing of another person. We encourage you to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Good morning. Good afternoon, I should say. My name's Ralph Myers. I'm from Bellingham, Washington. I'm here representing myself, and I want to thank you for allowing me to testify. I oppose this bill because my son, Tom, was murdered by a person that had a firearm that was stolen. No gun laws in the world saved his life, and I oppose any gun laws to that effect. Senate Bill 5463 would prohibit me to have the right to protect myself in my home if I cannot get access to the firearm. I'm a widower, 76 years old. I live alone, and I do use or have that firearm for my use. What I'm concerned about also as a citizen, my son's murderer will soon have his 3rd parole hearing in California. He knows where I live. And if he is released, I fear for my life in that respect because my late wife and I attended the parole hearings and were able to keep him behind bars. As far as the civil liabilities issues, after our son was murdered, my wife and I did try to go after our son's murderer, who was a juvenile at the time, to seek restitution from him. Our attorney told us, you know, you're not going to be able to do anything. This guy doesn't have any assets. So this bill, excuse me, I see my time's up, so I'll stop.
Thank you very much. Please proceed.
Good morning. My name is Boyd Nealon. I'm the project director for the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms, and I'm also president of Washington Arms Collectors. But today, I'd like to talk to you as a certified firearms instructor of more than 20 years. For over 20 years, I've described and demonstrated how to secure firearms to many hundreds of people, well over 1,000. I note that accidental firearms deaths are at their lowest since records started being kept a century ago, and today are even well below what they were when this bill was first offered about 20 years ago. Now, as then, we believe the existing reckless endangerment statute, RCW 9A 36050, adequately addresses this issue. The bill also does not protect the owner if the firearm is acquired by theft or unlawful entry, a provision common in other states with similar laws. Firearms owners should not be liable for crimes committed by a prohibited person who has illegally obtained their gun. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay, our next pro panel, and we'll be going down to 1 minute per person, Nyla Fritz, Tony Gomez, and Ray Miller. The next con panel, if you could be ready, will be Michael Carpenter, Sherry Erickson, and Greg Wonderly.
Good morning. My name is Nyla Fritz, and I'm a middle school principal in Shoreline and a proud educator of more than 15 years. I'm here today testifying in support of dangerous access prevention. I grew up in Moses Lake, Washington, and I am from a family of hunters who, like other testifiers mentioned, we learned about the rules of guns, and the rule was don't touch them. I suspect that's the normal for far too many. On February 2nd, 1996, a struggling and depressed 14-year-old Barry Lokitis, who had access to his family's guns, entered the junior high where my brother was a student. Barry was armed with a rifle, 2 handguns, and carried 78 rounds of ammunition. In a matter of minutes, my brother, a classmate, and their teacher were killed. 10 months later, my struggling 14-year-old cousin Aaron killed himself, his little sister, and his mother in their home with a small caliber rifle hanging above the bed in his parents' rooms. Barry and Aaron were children. They should not have had access to these firearms. Thank you.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm Tony Gomez, and I've been a safety professional at Public Health Seattle, King County for over 30 years. Proud on this MLK Day to report that Martin Luther King County also supports this bill. Sometimes we hear that safety officials should go after things like child drowning. Well, we can actually look to that as an excellent example of statewide decreases in child drowning due to the work the legislature did in providing for strong regulations around that. Unfortunately, unsafely stored firearms resulting in a tragedy exists far too often in Washington State. With 1.8 million firearm owners, just under half keep one firearm unlocked. That is a dangerous situation. Best practice is locked up with ammunition locked separately. Evidence includes over 100 times a year or so a student is suspended or expelled for bringing a firearm to school. Includes the millions of dollars worth of firearms that are stolen in the state each year. I've been part of over 80 reviews looking at child fatalities in King County since 1998. I can emphatically state safe storage is a prime cause of that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is Raymond Miller, and I live in Berryville, Washington, with my wife, Jennifer. I'm here for a lot of reasons today. I'm the proud grandfather of 13 wonderful kids. I'm a U.S. Air Force veteran and a Tuskegee Airman. I am also the vice chair of the Snohomish County Human Rights Commission, a clinical therapist, and a veteran advocate. All of these roles and experiences show me that the importance of safe firearm storage. I do everything in my power to ensure that my grandchildren are safe when they are under my care, and do my best to ensure that they are protected when they are out in the world. That includes having conversation with other families about any guns in the home and how they are stored. Sometimes these conversations make people uncomfortable, but we have to talk about safe storage and we have to legislate it. For me, having conversation about safe storage is nothing new. In various jobs, helping veterans return to civil life, safe stories and suicides are always part of this conversation. We call it safety planning. Thank you, and we support this legislation.
Thank you very much. Our next panel, Michael Carpenter, Sherry Erickson, and Greg Wonderly. And the next pro panel, if you could be on deck, Tim Moses, Leanne Kennedy, and Dylan O'Connor. Please proceed.
My name is Mike Carpenter.
And if you could bring the microphone over to your mouth, that would be great. Thank you.
My name is Mike Carpenter. I'm here to oppose the bills that's before us. These bills are generally admitted on the false promise of violence reduction. And given the prevalence of firearms in society today and the low incidence that they're used in violence, it's a false promise. It's simply there are simply better places to apply our attention. They wrongly focus on the law-abiding. They ignore the criminal element who simply doesn't follow these laws. And they ignore the defensive use of firearms. And I'll point to one example, which was the recent Texas church shooting. That shooting was perpetrated by an AR-15, and it was stopped by an AR-15 by a private citizen who had to retrieve his gun from the safe and load magazines on his way down the street as he was running down the street to save his neighbors. He stated that he didn't put his shoes on because he heard the shots and he knew each shot was one of his neighbors. That's why he was in such a hurry. And forcing these kinds of storage prohibitions will only delay the people who are trying to defend themselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please proceed.
My name is Sherry Erickson. I live here in Washington State, Pierce County. Concerning Senate Bill 5463, as a woman, it's my right to be able to protect myself, to be able to easily access my firearm in my home in the case of an intruder, to protect myself and my family. This bill makes me a criminal rather than the person invading my home. I responsibly store my firearm in my home with the doors locked and the security system on. And again, if someone's entering my home, threatening myself and my family, it's really important for me to be able to protect myself. And so, as a wife and a mom and a grandma, I thank you for voting no on these bills and protecting my women's rights.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. My name is Greg Wonderly. I'm a 20-year naval vet. I have 3 children who serve, one still serving, and a granddaughter who's serving. We take our oath very seriously, which that none of these rights shall be impaired or infringed. You're supposed to take your oath seriously as well. Every one of these bills infringes on those rights or impairs them. It impairs my ability to protect myself, my family, my property as I see fit. And that is an impairment if any of that is taken away. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Our next pro panel, the last pro panel on this bill, is going to be Tim Moses, Leanne Kennedy, and Dylan O'Connor. And the last con panel, if you could get ready, are going to be Mike Silvers, Roland Martin, and Ann Hamilton. Please proceed.
Good morning. My name is Timothy Moses. I'm a father of 3 living in the 35th District here in Tumwater. I'm also a military veteran. I'm a former paramedic and I'm a gun owner. I support the right of armed self-defense. I am here to support dangerous access prevention as well. The worst day of my career of over 16 years was a little boy who accessed his mother's revolver. She believed herself to be a law-abiding and responsible gun owner. She thought that the heavy trigger pull on that revolver was enough to keep her son from killing himself. It was not. I want to emphasize that she was a law-abiding and responsible person to the best of her knowledge. I view responsible storage as setting a standard of what we expect of gun owners, of our neighbors, to keep themselves and us safe. Lily would like to speak. We don't even know the scope of the problem because we don't really track these things well. But a quick search will show you numerous instances. Marysville, Pilchuck High School, Cascade Mall, the recent Freeman shooting outside Spokane.
But could I ask you to wrap up? Thank you.
As a law-abiding gun owner, I can defend myself. I can be in my safe in about 4 seconds. If I need my gun faster than that, I wear it. This does not infringe on my rights or my ability to defend myself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Leanne Kennedy from the 27th. I'm a retired school counselor and I practice as a therapist now. As a counselor, I have 2 deaths of my students that just haunt me all the time. One was a 13-year-old who got into an argument over very poor grades with his family, ran upstairs, found his stepfather's loaded shotgun, and put it under his chin and pulled the trigger. The other was a depressed teenager who was in counseling, who found an unloaded weapon in her home, and she pulled the trigger to her head, put the gun to her head. Access and time are critical to intervention with impulsive teenagers. Suicide is the 2nd leading cause of death for our teenagers in this state and nationwide. This bill is not about taking away your right to a gun or your right to access a gun. What it is about is responsibility as a gun owner. I cannot tell you how angry I was when I sat in a House hearing and heard that the death of young toddlers was not statistically significant enough to merit passage of similar legislation.
Sorry, could I ask you?
Yes, one death is one death too many. Our kids are our future. Please, can we come together and pass common sense legislation around this public health issue?
Thank you very much. Please proceed.
Good morning, my name is Dylan O'Connor. I live in the 43rd Legislative District. I'm a student at the University of Washington, and I'm proud to be an intern at the Alliance for Gun Responsibility. Unfortunately, I am all too familiar with the effects of gun violence on our community. In 2010, a close family friend of mine, Lisa Melancon, was shot and killed by a stray bullet as she stood on her porch at her home in Tacoma. A fight had erupted in her neighbor's house and had escalated to the point where the neighbor felt it necessary to come over and knock on Lisa's door and ask for help. Given her reputation in the community, they knew she would be. As one of the instigators fled in a car, he fired some shots back at the crowd of people, struck Lisa in the temple, and she was killed. Dangerous access prevention reduced the number of unlawfully obtained firearms in our community, like the one that was used to kill Lisa, and there is no reason why people like Lisa and their families must continue on and on to endure this tragedy and violence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your testimony. Our final con panel will be Mike Silvers, Roland Martin, and Ann Hamilton. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Mike Silvers. Safe storage, all of this other laws being proposed are not the answer. If we look at criminals today, they are not being prosecuted. I worked hard, real hard, on 3 strikes you're out for life and hard time for armed crime. Today, prosecutors use those laws only to plea bargain down to gross misdemeanors and misdemeanors. Thank you.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Yes, hello. My name is Roland Martin, 37th District. The point that I want to make today is that the purpose of the Second Amendment is to serve as a final check on abusive government. Towards that end, citizens in this country have had rough parity in firearm ownership since the American Revolution. As you begin to take away citizens' rights, to degrade their rights with incremental laws, you put less and less trust in citizens. That's not what should be the situation in a free country. I'm very concerned also that you're creating a database paired with constantly moving targets of law, which just creates a situation where ultimately you'll end up with people absolutely knowing what they own, where it's stored, and more abuse. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. My name is Ann Hamilton. I am the victim of armed robbery and home invasion. The first thing I saw coming through the door was a gun. I was confined. I was blindfolded. I was robbed. And my emotion was not fear. My emotion was anger that this has happened to me, that this was allowed to happen. And my emotion right now is I intend to defend myself. I don't want this to happen again. I intend to defend people that are around me, and if my guns are locked up, you are making me vulnerable again, which is a situation I don't want to be in. You could also make me a violator if I happen to go from one jurisdiction to another jurisdiction. What if travel from town to town to town? I could violate in several conditions without realizing it. So I ask you to defeat these bills.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your testimony on this bill. That'll conclude our public hearing on Senate Bill 5463. We'll move to a staff briefing on Senate Bill 6146. And while Tim is getting to the table, if I could bring up, is Executive Constantine here, Carmen Best, and Laura Laha as the first panel.
Good morning, Chair. Tim Ford, staff of the committee. Before you, Senate Bill 6146, which relates to local government authority to regulate firearms. By way of background, state law expressly exempts or preempts the regulation of firearms by local government within the state, and this includes registration, licensing, possession, purchase, sale, transfer, and transportation of firearms. It also includes ammunition and reloader components. And cities, towns, and counties may only enact those laws that are expressly authorized under state law, and that's generally to regulate the discharge of firearms within a part of their jurisdiction where there is a reasonable likelihood that humans or animals or property will be jeopardized, and also the possession of firearms in stadiums or convention centers operated by that local government. What this bill does is it repeals the preemption state law and allows local government to regulate firearms, and it removes those limited exceptions that specifically authorize regulation by local government.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for staff? All right. Mr. Executive, welcome back to the Senate Law and Justice Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, Senator Dingra, I served as the vice chair of this committee nearly 2 decades ago. Welcome. I am here in support of Senate Bill 6146 as well as 5463, 5444, and 5992. Gun violence is a public safety crisis, but it is also, of course, a public health crisis.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We'll do 2 minutes for each of the folks we'll just do one panel on each side for this. I'm sorry about that.
Thank you. And deaths from gun violence are a preventable public health problem, like auto crashes, sudden infant death syndrome, and smoking. In the wake of the Sandy Hook massacre 5 years ago, I ordered our public health department to develop a data-driven strategy to reduce gun violence that led to the Lock It Up program, our successful collaboration with law enforcement and retailers to promote responsible storage. We have many households in King County with loaded and unlocked guns, and many of those have children in them, and we know that children are 9 times more likely, youth are 9 times more likely to commit suicide in homes that have firearms that are unlocked. So Senate Bill 5463 will help reduce those risks and get more safe storage and into our homes, and we support it, and I'm proud of our public health approach, but we also are frustrated that we can't do more to help keep people alive, and that's why I support Senate Bill 6146 that lifts preemption and allows local governments to pass common sense safeguards. In brief, if we are able to provide more safeguards around safe storage, reporting of stolen firearms, and keeping guns away from children, we will be able to save lives in my community. I urge you to support Senate Bill 6146, and the other bill is to improve safe storage, limit bump stocks, and require enhanced background checks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please proceed.
Good morning, Chairman Pedersen and the committee. My name is Carmen Best. I am the chief of the Seattle Police Department, and I want to start by saying I fully support the Second Amendment, but I also support common sense gun laws that keep our community and our officers safe. Last year in Seattle, there were 360 incidents of shots fired, resulting in 70 injuries and 18 fatalities. One shot fired is just too many. We need laws that help us address this. Gun violence prevention can and should happen at every level of local government. Seattle has taken substantial steps to address gun violence. We require that lost or stolen guns be reported within 24 hours. We voted to approve a statewide initiative to require criminal background checks for all gun sales, and we tax gun sales and reinvest those proceeds in gun violence prevention, tracking, and research. But we need to do more. Seattle should have the authority to limit guns in certain public spaces. Local governments can pass laws in other areas of public safety, such as traffic rules, curfews, fireworks, and building safety codes. Similarly, the city should have the authority to limit guns in areas like parks, libraries, and places where our children, whom we love, where they learn and where they play. I've been in law enforcement for more than 26 years. I have seen firsthand the devastating impact of gun violence on individuals, families, and communities. We need measured, practical approaches that protect due process and crime prevention. I'm honored to join other leaders who care deeply about the safety of our community, and we look forward to contributing to this conversation going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please proceed.
My name is Laura Latta. I'm a stay-at-home mom and a volunteer with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. I live in Kenmore with my husband and our 2 daughters who are 3 and 6 years old. I'm here in support of restoration of local authority, which would improve public safety by repealing the preemption law that currently prevents Washington cities and counties from adopting and enforcing responsible, common-sense gun laws designed to keep our communities safe. My home is just down the street from the elementary school where my daughter attends 1st grade. Her school playground is also a city park. The use of this playground is governed by a joint use agreement between the school and the city. During school hours, the rules governing school campuses apply. After school hours, the rules governing city parks apply. The city's municipal code prohibits possession of open containers of alcohol, fireworks, crossbows, and bows and arrows in this park. But guns are allowed there as soon as the school bell rings. This is because under the state's current preemption statute, the city of Kenmore is powerless to prohibit the possession of firearms in any of its city parks. After school, this park is still filled with kids playing, sports practice, after-school activities. My daughter goes to drama and coding classes in a portable that sits practically on this playground. If someone comes in and flies a model airplane, I can call the police. But if someone walks into that park carrying a gun, they haven't done anything wrong until they've aimed it at someone. By then, of course, we know that it would be too late to call the police. Restoring local authority over firearms empowers municipalities to adopt and enforce reasonable firearms protections in public places, park by park, community by community, taking into account the unique features of individual places, like, for example, a park shared by an elementary school. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Before we bring up the comment panel, the prime sponsor is here. Senator Saldana, would you like to speak very briefly to your vote?
Thank you, Chair and colleagues, for taking the time to hear my bill this day, and for all those that are here from my district, the 37th, which is Central District, South Seattle, Renton. And basically, I think you've heard very strongly from those that came before me, but this really is a bill that comes out of my district. So there were serious lives lost in the parks that should be places of enjoyment and recreation. And this summer I participated in a cleanup of one of our local parks. It's right behind our middle school, and again, it's one of those parks that's used both for school facilities and also for the general public. And within 20 minutes of cleanup, I found 5 shell casings right around the swing sets that our children play in. And it called me to action that I need to support my local communities to be able to have all the tools in their toolbox to be able to keep our kids safe, to be able to make sure our communities are places that are welcoming communities. And so that's why I introduced this legislation, and thank you so much. I hope that you will consider it.
Thank you very much. We'll bring up our final panel for the day, a con panel, Alan Gottlieb, Keely Hopkins, and Phil Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and committee members. I'm Alan Gottlieb, Chairman of the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms, testifying in objection to Senate Bill 6146, which would violate our state preemption laws as it exists now. Washington was among the first states to adopt the statewide firearms law preemption. That set a trend that's actually been followed by 41 other states. A patchwork quilt of gun laws places honest, law-abiding gun owners at risk as they travel from city to city or county to county across our state. There's a reason we have uniform statewide laws on a variety of subjects. This is and should remain one of them. In fact, it should not be weakened, it should be strengthened so that cities like Seattle can't tax guns and ammunition out of existence. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chair Peterson, members of the committee, my name is Keely Hopkins, State Liaison for the National Rifle Association, here today in opposition to Senate Bill 6146. Washington State passed their state preemption law in 1983, and it was with the purpose of keeping firearms and ammunition laws consistent throughout Washington. This was accomplished by establishing that the state legislature has full authority to regulate and create laws pertaining to firearms. Just like Washington, over 40 states have passed state preemption laws, and with good reason. These laws help prevent a patchwork of gun regulations across the state, which can make it difficult for gun owners to ensure that they're following the law as they travel throughout Washington. Citizens that have no criminal intent should not be placed in jeopardy of violating local restrictions that they aren't even aware of simply because they've crossed from one city into another. Furthermore, Second Amendment rights are guaranteed to all citizens, regardless of where one resides. Washington State's preemption law ensures equal protection of firearm rights across the state. For those reasons, we would encourage you to oppose this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Phil Watson, representing Firearms Policy Coalition here in opposition to this bill. This bill would allow a confusing patchwork of laws that will surely ensnare thousands of unknowing citizens and legal residents from town to town, county to county, and a confusing array of laws that would change faster than the Western Washington weather. Moreover, the state of Washington's wise and reasonable preemption statutes ensures law-abiding people and law enforcement officers alike can rely on a well-considered, consistent framework of laws from county to county and town to town. This bill would allow local governments across the state to put good people at risk of accidental law violations and severely chill the exercise of fundamental individual rights under the Second Amendment and state constitutions. This bill has many flaws but one clear intent: to undermine and chill the exercise of fundamental individual rights. If this measure were about marriage, bookstores, churches, liquor stores, cars, hospitals, voting, or abortion clinics, it would be dead on arrival, and so should 6146 be roundly and summarily rejected. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That will conclude our public hearing on Senate Bill 6146. I'd like to thank the ranking member, the National Rifle Association, and the Alliance for Gun Responsibility for organizing very cogent and clear testimony. I think we were able to have a very good debate today. For the information of folks out there, we had 343 people signing in to testify. I'm sorry that we could accommodate only a portion of those, but we certainly welcome written comments from any of you to the committee, and we can include those in the record. We had a total of 967 people sign in support or opposition to these bills. So thank you for the interest in this, and thank you for a very civil debate.